Hi everyone, welcome to another race analysis video. This is the round 5 of the Super Series, racing in Masters 2. This race happened a while ago on the 18th of October at the Tailem Bend circuit. It's a 7.6 kilometre circuit. There's only about 15 metres of elevation in the whole circuit. And perhaps the most notable feature in the course is the absolute lack of features. This course is a MotoGP circuit. Apparently it's the second longest in the Southern Hemisphere. And it was only built a few years ago, and so it hasn't had time for the trees to grow up through the middle of it. So it's fairly windy. It's designed for motorsport, so it's designed for racing around at 200 kilometres an hour, not at 45. There's not a single technical corner in the entire race. About the most tricky part of it is a little bit of a chicane on the far side of the course. There's very little in the way of hills. Coming up around this corner is perhaps the steepest bit in the whole course. It's probably 6 or 7% for maybe 100 metres, if that. And you can see Darren, who's just ahead of me, 4.31. He just dances up these and basically hitting the brakes on the way up because everyone else is slowing down so much. So aside from a complete lack of features, it's got an enormously long, wide, open finishing straight. And basically set up for a perfect drag race between all the biggest teams. So coming into this race, I'm sitting in the leader's jersey of the Super Series. I've got about 12 points on the next guy. Just up ahead of me, 4.45 is Alex Jarvis from Norwood Red. He crashed at the Wallaroo road race, but still managed to finish in the top 10, and then he had a pretty good showing in the crit the following day. The other person who's sort of within striking distance of me on points is Michael Davies in the RoKiT. The other dangerous person in this race is Edwin. Edwin won the Wallaroo road race with a phenomenal solo attack, and he held off the chasing group of about 6 or 7 over the last 5 k's of gravel and then the last few k's into the run-in. So the teams in the black and white's Port Adelaide Cycling Club, that's my team. You've got Alistair just up ahead of me to the right, Thomas in the orange helmet, Milo is in the blue helmet, and Milo's our sprinter, or he's our intermediate sprinter. So he's the one we're protecting on this lap, which is the preem lap, so he's just ahead and to the left. The other teams are ADX in the green, Scion Racing in the black and yellow, RoKiT's in the yellow and red, Transitions Drivewear is in the stripy tops, and then there's 2 Norwood teams, red and blue. So this is the preem lap. I'm not going to be sprinting for the preems. This is Edwin just up on my right here with the silver bike. I'm not going to be sprinting for the preems, but at this stage I'm planning on leading Milo out if the opportunity arises. Alistair and KD are also tasked with leading Milo out. Unfortunately, they didn't ring the bell at the beginning of this lap, so there was a little confusion about whether or not this was indeed the preem. So we'll skip forward a little bit and see what happens with the preem. So we're coming in towards the end of the 4th lap. I've decided to move up a little bit closer to the front. There's 2 reasons for this. One is if I can help with the lead out for Milo, I will. But also, after the preem, there's often a group that goes off the front, and I wanted to at least be close enough to the front that I didn't have to sprint to catch up with it. Norwood comes in and takes over the pacemaking for me, quite happy with this. I don't really want to be on the front. One of his teammates comes through in a moment. And at the moment, I'm just watching over my left shoulder to see if I can see the lead out forming with Milo behind Alistair and KD. Get another Norwood guy deciding he wants to be behind his teammate. That's fine with me. And I think there's a Scion guy on his wheel. I'm not interested in going back any further. Happy sitting 3rd wheel. So I'm just going to sort of have a bit of a fight for this wheel, which I eventually win. So you can see from the, ignoring the course map in the bottom right, you can see that there's very little in the way of features. And this is pretty much it for the whole course anyway. KD's on the front, he's leading out, he's looking back for Milo. Alistair's yelling, "Where is he? Where's Milo?" And the answer is we don't know. Turns out he didn't hear the bell because there wasn't one, and so didn't know to get to the front at the end of this lap. Realising that I'm not going to burn any matches here, and I'm just pumping out a fairly, I'm still doing 400 watts, drifting backwards through the group, but there's enough people going for this that I don't see a breakaway getting away, and in any event I've got 2 or 3 of my teammates up the front. Now what ended up happening here was that Alistair and KD, seeing that Miller wasn't there, they went for the preem themselves and got 2 and 3, second and third respectively. So even though they couldn't get the win for the preems, they still took the points, which means that the guy who is sitting equal first in the preems didn't get any, and so Miller didn't go any further back. So with the preem out of the way, our strategy now is to control the front of the race. We don't want to do all the work, but what we want to do is make sure that we're up at the front, working out if any attacks go off, who's in them. We're not worried about shutting everything down. There's still another 30 odd Ks of this race to go, but there's a few people that we are worried about getting off the front. I've spoken about Edwin before. He can do a 15-minute solo effort that'll pretty much hold off a peloton. Then there's Michael Davies, also on Team RoKiT. He's currently sitting in second overall, and he's a former National Masters time trial champion. So if he does get off the front, he realistically can stay away. And especially if he and Edwin get off the front, then we've got to do a lot of work, because that's a very strong 2-up breakaway. So our guys are sitting at the front or near the front, taking turns and just kind of watching who's going off the front. We're a bit later on in the race now. An attack's just gone off the front. The bunch has split ever so slightly, and now my team's going to bring me up to the front. You can see Alex Jarvis is moving up, someone from ADX, and then Darren Searle calls me through. I get on his wheel, and he does a really good turn and just pulls me right to the front of this trailing bunch. Now the gap's being closed, but the pace has had a big surge, and this is when gaps can happen. So at this point it's really important to be near the front of the race, and this is why having a really strong team to do that work and drag you from the middle of the safe peloton all the way up to near the front where you need to be. So he's dragged me up to near where Alistair is. I've done a little bit of work just to sort of drop back in onto Alistair's wheel. And I'm quite happy here because I can see the front of the race, I can see there's not a big gap, and I've got one of my strongest teammates sitting just in front of me, and I know that he can close just about anything. Having said that, it just became apparent that even though we've got a guy doing some significant work on the front, a group of 2's got off the front, and guess who it is? It's Michael Davies and Edwin Bohdan, the 2 RoKiT guys, both of whom are super strong time trialists. Now, we've got a long way to go on this race. It's a 62-kilometre race. In theory, it should come back. It soon becomes apparent that nobody else is really wanting to do some work, at which point it's up to us. So Alistair and Darren pull their way out, head onto the front, and the 3 of us settle down to do a bit of work chasing this back. Now, to some extent, it's not just on us. Just because I've got the jersey doesn't mean that we have to chase everything back. But when the number 2 guy is off the front with his strongest teammate, then I think it does, a bit of responsibility does fall on us. Now we probably get this wrong a little bit. Alistair does some superhuman turns, and as you can see I've actually skipped the turn right off the very front, right off the bat. Darren is a time trialist, he's super strong, and so the 2 of them can and do in the end do most of the work. But given that we've got 2 super strong guys off the front as well, I do end up pulling a few turns trying to bring it back. So quite cleverly, RoKiT has got a guy sitting directly behind us, and they're going to disrupt any chase effort that might happen. And you can see from the rear camera we've actually got a bit of a gap at this point, and I'm yelling out to Alistair asking whether or not we should make this stick, or whether we let the peloton come back to us and then drag that back to the front. And I think there's probably the right answer to this is let the peloton come back. As I said, there's still a long way to go, and although this is a 4-up breakaway with a couple of strong time trialists, the chances are if we get this many people off the front, the peloton will start to work, and I don't think we can hold them off for the entire race. But knowing that there's two RoKiT guys off the front, we've got to be a bit careful, because this guy on my wheel is clearly not going to do any work at all, and he's just going to get on the front and soft pedal as soon as one of us pulls off. I'm holding a bit over threshold at that point, nothing too serious, but I am wanting to keep this chase going. I roll off, and Alistair gets straight back on the front and starts motoring. Unfortunately, again, he puts in a dig that's perhaps a little bit too fast, and a gap opens up. At this point, I'm yelling to Darren on my right here just to let him go, because if Alistair gets up the front with those two, we can sit back, because Alistair would be able to go the distance with them, assuming the peloton doesn't chase him back, and he'd probably have enough of a sprint to beat certainly Edwin and probably Michael as well. In any event, the rest of the peloton comes through and starts giving us a little bit of a hand chasing them back, and over the course of the next couple of Ks, we eventually do get them back. So they've spent about 10 minutes off the front, and here I am sandwiched between Edwin in front of me and Michael behind me. They've had about a quarter of a lap to recover, and at this stage I'm thinking they're pretty much cooked. Until this. So Michael comes up and has a quick chat with Edwin. At this point I'm getting real nervous. Something's clearly about to happen. I'm watching for it. I figure one of them's going to go again, and sure enough, Edwin just puts in a bit of a dig coming up around this corner here. Now, fortunately for me, Norwood Blue sees this as well. I get on it, and there goes Edwin. He's launched an attack off the front, and fortunately I don't have to do too much work immediately. I think this is Raf from Norwood Blue, and who should be on my wheel but yet another RoKiT racer, clearly not going to do anything in the chase. Norwood does a phenomenal turn trying to get him back. Now what's happened from our team perspective is we've spent a lot of guys doing a lot of work on the front, and they've each done a heroic turn, pulled off, and then it's all come back together. And just after Alistair had done a fairly big turn on the front himself, keeping the pace high, he'd rolled off, dropped back into the bunch, and that's when this attack went. So this attack was timed absolutely perfectly. Edwin's a phenomenally strong rider, and I mean, have a look at where he is on the lap track, and I'll skip forward in a minute to where he eventually gets caught. But this is a fantastic attack, a fantastic breakaway from a really strong rider, and the timing was just excellent. So the pace accelerates, the group eventually does pull through, and some of the peloton does some work, but once again it's left up to us to chase this down. Now at this stage I'm far enough ahead of Edwin that even if he wins, so long as I get top 5 or so, he's not going to trouble me at the top of the scoreboard. But if he does win, that brings him up really close, and there's a few races coming up, particularly the really hilly Gawler Kermesse, which he has a good shot of winning as well. So from my perspective, he is a dangerous rider. He is someone that we probably should be trying to bring back, because if I can get a few more points ahead of him in a sprint finish, hopefully I can take him out of contention for the overall. So I'll skip forward a bit more to the chase. So after a bit of faffing around, Edwin gets a bit of a break, and then my guys come to the front, and first of all Alistair and KD do some pretty phenomenal turns. Alistair's just too strong, and he's dropping poor old KD and me. Eventually ADX comes to the front, I close him down, and then at that point the rest of the peloton comes through. Norwood Red and Norwood Blue start doing quite a lot of work. I think at this point Norwood Red is all in for their sprinter Alex, and rightfully so, he's a fantastic sprinter. And you can see each of them just doing a turn and then pulling off and dropping straight back into the bunch. We've come through, done some more turns on the front. Richard's come through, KD and Alistair are still working really hard. Michael Wheeler, he's absolutely flogging himself on the front, doing phenomenal turns. Here comes Darren. I mean, this is a phenomenal team chase. Everyone from my team, absolutely everyone, was pulling a turn at some stage in this, trying to close this down. The problem was every time we got off the front, then the pace would slow down, and Edwin would just get another couple of seconds up the road. And you can see he's just dangling off the front. Alistair's doing huge turns trying to pull him back, and then finally this guy from USG comes through and finishes it off and pulls him back. But I want you to look at where he is on the track. We've done a full lap and a quarter, and he's held off the peloton all by himself, with a concerted team chase from my team for well over a lap. I mean, this guy is strong. He is a dangerous guy to let off the front, and I think from our perspective it was a mistake letting him get off the front in the first place. Unfortunately, what happened is he got off the front just after Alistair had pulled a turn, similar to the first break, and there was no one from our team patrolling at that point on the front. So Edwin's taken us into the last lap, and unfortunately for me, my team has just spent so many matches trying to bring him back, and I mean we had to. He might have been slowing down towards the end, but he was just holding us off so well, and we had to bring him back. Now, fortunately for me, this guy from USG just pulls this absolute hero turn. I mean, we are 2, 3, 4 kilometres from the end, maybe 2 k's from the end, and he's just sitting on the front absolutely drilling it, and I'm not entirely certain why. His team doesn't have a sprinter at the moment. Their sprinter, Phil Bray, is still out of action at this point. He comes back in some later races. And this is where I make some interesting tactical decisions, and it's something that NorCal Cycling had a go at me for. I'm really nervous about losing the front of the race. And you can see here, ADX is setting a tempo on the front, and I want to be on that train. I want to sit third wheel. And the reason for that is I'm really worried that if I don't, I'm going to get washed backwards into the churn, and I'm not going to be able to make it to the front for the sprint. I'm having a bit of an argy-bargy with the third guy on the ADX train at the moment. He's somewhat protective of his wheel, and he hip and shoulders me a few times. But eventually I drop back into it. And then all of a sudden the ADX train just blows up and disappears. And when it does, it just goes backwards. And this is something that I'm really worried about. If I'm following the wrong train and another train comes through, am I going to get stuck? And so here comes RoKiT. They're pulling through for Michael Davies now, so Edwin didn't work, so now they're coming through for Michael Davies. The ADX train just disappears into the background, and I've jumped across into third wheel on the RoKiT train. And I'm pretty comfortable here. I had to do a small surge to get onto it, but no one's going to get away, and I can see exactly what I'm doing, and we're coming into a few corners to go. Now, I think I would have done better if I'd been sitting back a few more wheels. If I'd been sitting maybe 5th or 6th wheel, or even with this far to go, maybe 10th wheel. But I'm so nervous about a train going off the front and me not being able to get on it that I'm just sitting here nervously. And then here comes KD on my right, and I want to get onto him. So jumping across once again to get another train. Who's that? That's Michael coming through, and so this is fantastic. I've now got 2 of my guys on the front. Unfortunately, I think this was a little bit too early, but I got to say, at this point, I was completely disoriented. I had no idea how much was left in the lap, and it's not really until you get to this rise and you can see the buildings in the front that you realise you've got probably another K and a half to go, because that's the finishing straight, but you've got to turn away and go all the way back to the far side of the course before you can actually manage to hit it. 2 more guys from ADX have made it back to the front. I'm with 2 of my guys on the front. I'm feeling like third wheel to their train is just as good as third wheel to the front, because I know that I've got a few people up there. RoKiT goes again on the left, and once again I'm going to want to get on this. Alistair shouts out, lets me know he's there, and now I'm feeling pretty confident because I've got 2 of my lead out guys right here. The only thing is we're a little bit far from the end. We've got, looks like Edwin on the front again, keeping the pace high. Alistair starts lining it up, and I think at this point it might have been a question of getting the wrong corner. I'll have to talk to Alistair later about where his head was at this point. Because this isn't a race where getting into the last corner first or getting out of the last corner first is going to win you the race. The drag from the last corner to the finish line is so long that you've almost got to spend 2 or 3 more sprinters, more lead-out guys, to get you there. At this point, I'm already doing 500, 600, 650 watts, and I've still got maybe 400 metres to go to the finish line. And all of a sudden, out of absolutely nowhere, off goes Tommy Baxter, and he just launches a nuclear attack, and I've got nothing, absolutely nothing to match that with. This sprint is way longer than what I'd normally be keen for. He's posted up with 100 metres to go to the line. Alex Jarvis comes real close to coming past me on my left, and Michael Davies coming through in fourth. So I think I was lucky at this point that I was able to hold off Alex. I think if I had maybe one extra guy, or if we'd started our sprint a bit later, I might have been able to keep up with Tommy Baxter. If I'd been right on his wheel, I might have been able to keep up with him. But as it was, that was with me, with absolutely everything I've got. And as NorCal put it, Baxter was in a different postcode at that point.
Good teamwork.
So anyway, guys, this was a really interesting race. Considering the track was in itself quite boring, it was raced brilliantly by RoKiT Racing. As usual, their team tactics are phenomenal, and they've got a couple of really strong guys who can go really long. And what they did brilliantly is they burnt out all of my lead out, meaning it was just Alistair at the end all by himself, and even Alistair can't do a 1 kilometre lead out strong enough to hold off the likes of Tommy Baxter when he's on form. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you at the next one. Bye for now.
On your wheels, right.